Hi, Living Guardians, Unseen Inquisitor here. The Wednesday this week in Destiny, because Thursday was Thanksgiving here in the States, went over stuff we were expecting. Exotic armor tuning and stasis updates. But also went over stuff we were not expecting. Changes to other abilities and changes to armor mods. So there's a lot of uproar and negativity surrounding all this stuff. Gotta be honest with you, I don't really care. It doesn't seem as bad as people are making out. I think there's a lot of griping and whining going on, as it always happens, but I think there's a lot going on for this in particular because it's a lot out of nowhere happening, granted, for sure, and the current state of Bungie and Destiny in the viewpoint of the player base right now is not in the best of states. So it's going to lead to more outright negativity towards them and towards stuff. But with that said, I want to reserve final judgment on these changes until we experience them in-game and get some proper seat time with them in Season 23. I'll go over my initial thoughts here and why I feel it's not that big of a deal and why the viewpoint I think is the way it is right now with all the whining and stuff going on. I'm not just saying that to sound, blunt and edgy or anything like that. It's how it always goes down. So if you happen to be somebody who stumbles across this forgotten sector of the internet and decided amongst the sea of content out there for this topic to click on this video, welcome. Whatever mistake brought you here, I appreciate it. I hope you'll stick around to the end of the video and share your thoughts in the comment section down below to be part of the conversation. So pull up a chair and hang out and let's do this. This might go a little long. I ramble at times. Most of the time. Anyways. Negativity and all that jazz. Given the recent events that have happened around Bungie, there is a sour taste in people's mouth for Bungie, overall the company, and the player base of Destiny 2 is not that happy right now either, so Destiny 2 isn't looked at that well either by the player base. It's got that kind of sourness to it a little bit for a lot of people, and that I think is definitely responsible for it being in its lowest player count kind of ever. But a game franchise that's approaching 10 years and stuff, you don't just always ascend, so it's whatever. I'm more curious what the player count would be post-final shape. But in any case, my point is this. The overall landscape is in a negative light right now. So anything that's done, no matter if it's good or not, is going to be tinged by that negative light a bit. So when you have these changes that we were not expecting, that are ultimately a negative change, and a change in a negative direction for our power, albeit a small one, of course that negative light is going to latch onto that, and this is going to compound to a negative viewpoint of it. But, with that said, the changes are very clear. Bungie feels our survivability is ridiculous, and it is 100%. We like that though, as players, of course. Well, clearly it's too ridiculous to just leave alone, and they're trying to rein in a little bit. And this is honestly the best case scenario. The other way you deal with this is how they were talking about it back in the day with Divinity's change, right? What they were talking about there was, look, given the sheer amount of Divinity usage, it's the go-to tactic for boss damage and stuff like that. We either tone Divinity down to normal weakening levels, or we have to power up everything else that you're facing, which will require Divinity usage and punish those who cannot or do not use it. Well, in the case of this survivability, either they try to rein us in a little bit, or they up everything's power against us, make everything harder to kill, hurt us more or less, thus requiring these crazy builds and punishing those who either don't have the gear yet because they're newer players or just haven't been lucky to make the build yet or whatever it is, and make it that much harder to go through things without running these very select builds, which is what Bungie's trying to avoid in the first place. They want to keep it more open-ended. So the changes that we're getting are the better alternative to just beefing up everything in a negative power creep against us. So there's that to keep in mind. But it is still a lot, and that comes from the fact that Bungie as a company, and they've admitted this several times, is a slow company to do anything. Programming and developing, fixes, bug fixes, tuning and all that jazz is slow on all of it. And they've admitted this multiple times. The thing is, they haven't done anything about it. They're still slow, which just speaks to a feeling of laziness of them in the player base at large. So that's not good either. As such, these changes, a lot of them could have happened over time if they were more attentive to these things instead of being slow about it and quote unquote lazy about it, right? But they haven't been. So here we are with this laundry list, which includes Strand stuff, which is, since Strand is new, it makes sense that they'd be doing it now. I mean, they're attentive there. It's a new subclass, so they got to kind of chisel it in and make it fit amongst the others, and play nice all around, right? But still, we have Woven Mail and Banner of War. Banner of War is an obvious one. If you didn't think Banner of War is ever going to get touched, you're naive, straight up. But this fast, I guess, wasn't expected. But Woven Mail, Banner of War. We have Restoration. We have Devour. We have Throwing Hammer and Soul Invictus as ability tunings that we're not expecting. And then with that, we have armor mods. Firepower, Heavy-Handed, Reaper, Momentum Transfer. I think Bolstering Detonation, other similar mods are all being tweaked as well. This is a lot. And when you have a laundry list hit you out of nowhere and it's of a negative light and stuff's already in a negative light, the player base is immediately on the defensive, immediately against it, right? Now, if you took these changes, not the Strand ones, but the rest, and you've incorporated them over time, you wouldn't get that, right? If they took and did the Throwing Hammer and Soul Invictus change together in Season 19, let's say, because the power of Soul Invictus and the Throwing Hammer didn't magically appear overnight. We've seen it prior to Season 19, all the way through into Season 19 and beyond to here, obviously. So let's say they did it in Season 19, which is basically a year ago. They do the change then. They'd be grumblings, of course, but it wouldn't be that big. It's a minor thing at the end of the day. And then, a season or two, 2 seasons later, you change Restoration. Last season, you do the Devour change, let's say. You now have had these changes happen on their own to their own minor grumblings, but not that much in comparison to what we have now. Theoretically, of course, anyway, I wouldn't think there'd be as much grumblings about it. But because they're all happening now alongside other stuff, that's where you get a lot of this backlash, and I completely understand why. So, in any case, with that said, let's go through them real quick. Woven Mail affects all of the Strand subclass stuff, right? By that I mean for all 3 classes. It affects Titan, Warlock, and Hunter. 55% to 45% damage resistance. 45% damage resistance is still really good, but there's a psychology of numbers going on here. 45 is less than 50%, so 45 is less than half. 55 is more, so 55 is more than half. We're going from more than half to less than half damage resistance, and when the mind automatically sees it like that, and when it's put that way, which is how a lot of people kind of view it, it seems so much worse than it actually is. Now, of course, in raw numbers, 45 is less than 55, but it's still really good. So if you're dropping from 55 to 45, that means builds that have the crazy 90, high 90% damage resistance going on when the build's all said and done are now going to be in high 80%. And you know what? That's not bad. That's not bad at all. Here's the deal about Woven Mail and later on Restoration when I get to it. These changes are to slow us down, right, in that survivability department that they specifically talk about and highlight as the big cause for these changes. We are too survivable, and I get it, right? Either they make us less survivable or they make everything kill us easier to account for it. So this is the better route to go. But this Woven Mail change and the Restoration one I'll talk about in a little bit, we're not going to notice it in the day-to-day stuff, seasonal mission stuff. We're really not going to notice it. is when you go into the high-end tier of difficulty. Master Raids, Master Dungeon, Master Lost Sectors, maybe even Legend Nightfall and higher, Legend missions perhaps. This is where you might notice it for sure, or that's the word to say. This is where you will notice it for sure and might notice it a lot more, like, impactfully, because things are naturally more dangerous, especially if you do not play smartly and you just face tank everything because of because that's how we've been doing stuff a lot, right? With builds, this change you'll notice for sure, especially when you put yourself in precarious situations you really shouldn't. So these changes ultimately boil down to Bungie wanting us to be a little bit less survival and play smarter, right? We're not going back to the ways we would play in Destiny 1 and the early days of Destiny 2, but back in those days, the player base definitely played a whole lot smarter with doing stuff and dealing damage and surviving. Well, bring a little bit of that back and you'll be golden. So that's how I look at it anyway. 55 to 45, I'm hardly losing sleep over. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe when I experience it in game, I'll be like, wow, this is so much worse. But I really don't think so. And you just gotta play a bit smarter is all, which the player base hates doing, right? At large, thinking is a no-no. They don't want to do that. They want to be on autopilot and just kill everything and not have to think about anything. This is especially true in any matchmade activity where you're the only person that can deal with the champion properly. You've seen it. You've experienced it. You know what I'm talking about. Anyways, moving on with this long-winded video. Banner of War. Yes, it just came out. Yeah, it needs to be touched. It's so good. We all know this, right? I'm a Sunbreaker Titan main when I play Titan. Voidwalker Warlock's my main overall in the game, but when I play Titan, I'm almost always Sunbreaker. I don't remember the last time I touched Stasis or even Arc. And they're not bad at all. I just always Sunbreaker. Unless I really have to be something else. But I'll do Strand. I'll mess with Strand. It's fun. Because Banner of War is that crazily good. And the change that's happening doesn't feel that bad to me at all. You're going to take twice as long to get the Banner of War times 2, times 3, and times 4. Because it's basically making it take double the amount of kills to do so, roughly, more or less, depending upon what you're killing. But to compensate for that, the amount of time you get added per enemy defeated is going up. So what it sounds like to me is we're going to have Banner of War for longer, but at a lower tier until you eventually get to times 4, right? So that really doesn't bother me. Now, unless I'm missing something with Banner of War, it's entirely plausible, though I reread it. I don't really see a big problem with that at all. It's not bad. Still going to be a great aspect to run. Personally, I don't really care about getting Banner of War times 1 going. After that, however high it gets is however high it gets, but I really only need Banner of War times 1 for my build to really feel survivable and where I want them to feel. But that's just me. Other people live for the Banner of War times 4 craziness, I get it. But I still think Banner of War is going to be great. Restoration. Here's another case of having to play smarter. Where we can be overwhelmed easier because we're going from 40 health per second in PvE down to 35, I believe, and from 65 down to 50 in PvE for times 2 restorations. Times 1 is down to 35, times 2 is down to 50 health per second. Again, really not that bad. It's going to do a lot of work for you, but it is going to be easier for enemy damage to overwhelm your health and overwhelm your healing. So you have to play smart. Yeah, there's a whole legion of enemies shooting at you. Maybe you should stop and shoot them back and kill them, right? Before just going about your business doing whatever. Take an extra couple of seconds and kill some stuff. Not a big deal. So that's how I look at it with Restoration. Restoration, though, is one of those things that could have changed 6 months ago and it would have been fine. It would have been a grumble, but it really wouldn't be a big deal at all. But it's part of this laundry list, right? So it adds to the weight of it. Devour. The only thing that's happening to Devour is that it's feeling more at home for the Warlock like it should, because that's where it started. Since launch of Destiny 2, we've had Devour as a Warlock in one of the subclass nodes. Well, Echo of Starvation allows any class to have Devour now as Void, and it allows you to get Devour without running Feed the Void as a Warlock if you so desire. I always run Feed the Void as a Voidwalker. But anyways, so if you don't have Feed the Void active as a Warlock, and if you are a Titan or a Hunter in general, you will not get a full instant heal when you get a tick of Devour on activation or on refreshing the timer. Those Devour ticks that happen will not fully heal you anymore. Instead, you'll get 100 health, which is fantastic, considering how fast you can proc Devour and keep it going, right? Or, how fast you can refresh Devour and keep it up. You'll be getting plenty of health, and you'll be being pretty healthy at the end of the encounter for sure. Plus, it does whatever else it does. When you run Feed the Void, you'll notice no difference because you get a full heal, and you'll get increased grenade energy as well with Feed the Void active. I like this because Devour is Warlock's helm, right? The Hunter's helm is invisibility for Void, and the Titan's main thing is overshield as Void. We have fragments that allow us to go invisible and do overshield stuff, but ultimately, the wheelhouse of invisibility is in the Hunter, right? They do it best. Overshields are done best by Titan, and now Devour won't just be easier for Warlocks to proc, but they'll be the best at, doing Devour. So I think it works. Throwing Hammer is a weird one. From instantaneous to 1.4 seconds until you get the Throwing Hammer back. It's still going to be a full refund from picking it up. It's just not instant anymore. This is more so for boss damage, right? When you get the build going, your Throwing Hammer hits like a power weapon. And being able to spam that is kind of nuts. So I get why the change is there. It's not going to be fun, but considering how I tend to use it a lot, or way more so than for boss damage, I tend to use it way more in the ad clear role and just running through encounters and doing stuff by throwing a hammer and then punching stuff and throwing a hammer and whatever else. So in that regard, I personally don't think I'll notice that much of a change. It'll, at the end of the day, just encourage more gunplay. That's really what it's encouraging. And that's not a big deal because it's a first-person shooter game anyway, and I have the gun out there and I'll just be using it more than what I tend to do now as a Titan. So yeah, the Throwing Hammer change is a bit weird. It's going to take some getting used to, but I don't have a big issue with it. Solo Invictus don't have a big problem either, because a lot of my sunspots, I don't end up in them. Or if I do, it's for a brief couple seconds before moving on. It's only in a couple of instances where I'm really just hanging out in a sunspot for the entire duration. So going from 20 to 12, of course, is less, and I'd rather have more or the same, but it's really not that big of a deal to me. And I don't really think a lot of players, especially if you're making sunspots on the fly and you keep moving, you're not going to notice it too much. Outside of that, super cooldown being higher for Ward of Dawn. I didn't mention this. Ward of Dawn and Well of Radiance are getting their super cooldown extended, so it'll be even a bigger timer until it comes back naturally. Ultimately, I say whatever. There's not much else to say there. We're still going to use them, right? It's not like we're not going to use them. So there's that. As far as the armor mod stuff goes, the things that pick up Orbs of Power are getting tweaked there, and the Firepower, Heavy Handed, and Reaper Orb Generation has a cooldown of 10 seconds, so it'll make another orb. This really only impacts Reaper for something like a Hunter with, Arc Hunter that can dodge, punch something, kill it, get their dodge back. Well, you have to kill someone with a weapon for Reaper anyway, but the other thing with Reaper is if you don't kill something within 10 seconds of using a class ability, you don't get the orb. That one makes sense thematically. The 10-second cooldown for Firepower and Heavy Handed is just to slow down our orb generation. This is because back when we had these things like this, before they reworked stuff and got rid of Elemental Wells, we used to make a lot of Elemental Wells. Well, when they got rid of that, they basically went, okay, since you're not making any more wells, we're going to do this for orb generation. Well, now we made too many orbs for Bungie's liking, in conjunction with all these other mods to reduce cooldowns. So we're getting supers and abilities back like it ain't no thing, right? Well, it's a thing to Bungie, and that's why these changes are here. But this really only seems like it's going to impact solo play significantly. Outside of that, especially when it comes to raiding, the fire team's making orbs. There's going to be orbs out there. I just, I don't know how impactful it's going to actually feel in practice because these are armor mods and these are builds, and this is affecting every single subclass because of that. So we'll have to see. But I still think, we'll be pretty okay. We'll still be pretty quick on the ability uptake and usage, right? Because we still have this happening. We're still getting a benefit. It's just slowing it down a little bit. We're not going back to Destiny 1 or early Destiny 2 days of abilities being a supplement to what we naturally do with our guns, right? We flip-flopped where abilities are the primary and guns back it up. I think this is trying to bring it more to a 50-50 split, and we'll see how it actually feels. But I don't really foresee too much outside of solo play. But with your put-together builds for solo play, you should still be pretty good and have pretty good ability uptime. So I'm not that worried myself. We'll have to wait and see. With all that said, on the flip side, they could do none of this and just make everything much more lethal against us, but that wouldn't be fun for anybody. So I think this is the better alternative for sure, and we'll have to see how it feels once we get some proper seat time, let a couple weeks go by of playing through the game at your own pace and getting a feel for this stuff. Then I'll do a follow-up on how these changes feel. But they're not bad individually. It's the fact that Bungie just decided to do them all at once, out of nowhere, instead of over time, like a diligent company should, that I think is getting people's nerves on end and getting them ticked off. And I get it. I get that, right? Because, come on. Devour and Restoration and all the rest that are not Strand didn't just pop up overnight. You could have done this over time and saved the backlash, but whatever. In any case, I've gone on long enough. What are your thoughts? If you made it to the very end, that's awesome. Share your thoughts in the comment section, and alongside your thoughts, comment the word Nerf so I know you made it to the very end of this video. And thanks so much for stopping by. Until next time, Guardians, stay frosty.